USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Week in Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to the USCHO Weekend Review podcast being recorded October 13th, 2019. I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly. And Jim, things are really starting to get going. Already quite a few upsets and probably this coming week, a new number one in the USCHO.com poll.
Yeah, I think the early season, it's hard to kind of predict who should be around the top. And, Minnesota Duluth, I think, defaulted there a little bit as last year's national champion, two-time defending national champion. But they fall once this weekend. And I do think you're right. I think we will have a new number one this upcoming week.
Well, let's start out with the USCHO game of the week, and that had Wisconsin at Boston College. It didn't disappoint, but the Eagles came away with a 5-3 victory. Yeah,
and I think a lot of people going into that really were focused on the freshmen, rightfully so. You had 5 first-round draft picks from last year's draft, all freshmen playing in that game. You had 6 total first-rounders. Yeah, you threw another one in. From an earlier class. I mean, that was a lot of youth and a lot of talent on the ice, but it ended up really being the experience as Julius Matala for BC and David Cotton, both seniors. They end up with 3 of the 5 goals and some of the big goals to grab the lead and extend the lead and kind of the insurance marker. So you love to think that the youth movement is going to do something. And listen, there was a lot of great performances by some of these talented young freshmen, but sometimes you just have to rely on that experience. And BC has that experience at this point, and I think it's going to play a big role in their team. And we are definitely can be sure that will come back and be a very good win for Boston College. You got to think this is a BC team that really, for the last couple of years, struggled out of conference. So to get that first win out of conference, a big boost in their confidence and probably some momentum in this season.
And I think both those teams expect to see themselves in the NCAA tournament, and it wouldn't be a long shot to see both of them in Detroit at the Frozen Four.
No, I mean, listen, there's a lot of hockey to be played, but if you want to talk about the possibility, yeah, I think both of them have the possibility of being NCAA teams. And once you get there, a couple of good games, a couple of good bounces, and next thing you find yourself 2 wins away from a national title.
Those 2 teams went on to have other games on the weekend. Wisconsin at Merrimack, 11-5 drubbing of the Warriors. And, you talk about offense and you talk about freshmen. The story came to light in that game with Wisconsin.
Yeah, Alex Turcotte was the higher of the 2 draft picks. He had a couple of goals in that game. Cole Caulfield, he had 2 on Friday for BC. He ended up with 2 more on Saturday. From what Todd Milewski posted today, I'm guessing that he's the first player in the modern era of Wisconsin hockey to have multi-goal games back-to-back to start their career, which is obviously a pretty impressive stat. But that game, that just shows the explosiveness of the Wisconsin offense in the second period at Merrimack. And before they headed to the locker room, it was 8-2. Before Merrimack struck again, it was 10-2. So I'm sorry. I guess it was 8-3 and 10-3. But you get my point. They can score and they can score fast. And I saw some highlights from that game, and score a goal and then they score in the ensuing faceoff. I think they did that twice. So I think we're going to see a lot of goals scored by this Wisconsin team. Is there maybe a concern the fact that they gave up 10 on the weekend? Maybe. They did play their backup goaltender for a good part of the third period on Saturday, and he allowed a couple of goals. So I'm not sure what that means. Is that going to be maybe one of the areas, though, that's going to have to become more of a focus, team defense? We've seen, you can go back to some of those good Penn State teams here in recent years. they could score at will, but they could also put watch the opponent put 2, 3, 4 goals up quickly as well because they had some defensive issues. So I think I like a lot about Wisconsin, and this was a fine weekend for them. But there's still some issues as there. I think every team out there in the nation probably agrees that there's a lot more hockey to be played, and that there's a lot of time to work on the problems.
With Wisconsin, Tony Granato and his staff have been recruiting their guys and starting to really put a mark on that. But when you look at guys like Caulfield and Turcotte, who are odds-on favorites to turn pro after their freshman seasons, it's sort of like you got to get it done this year.
Yeah, we kind of mentioned that last week in the game of the week, and there probably does feel like there's a sense of urgency. And you've got other players. Keandre Miller had a couple of goals on Saturday. I think he has potential to go to the NHL after this season. So you do have to worry about that. That's your biggest concern. Is there kind of a ticking clock in back of you that says if you don't do it this year, you might not have a shot? But I also think that sometimes success and a knowledge that you can get the best recruits then breeds more good recruiting. And if they keep winning these types of recruiting battles and they can kind of get these teams to gel, then I think that there's a chance for some sustained success. Wisconsin hockey could be back to where it was when we go back to the mid to early 2000s. When Mike Eaves had his team winning a national championship and playing in national title games.
Meanwhile, Boston College had another game, non-conference game. That was on Sunday, finished just before we started recording, so we don't even have the final stats in front of us. But Boston College with a 3-0 win over Colgate. And after that long losing streak you mentioned out of conference that went several seasons, to start with 2 non-conference wins in a row, it's got to feel really good for Jerry York and his squad.
Yeah, big confidence booster. And you add in, Spencer Knight, obviously, he's the highly touted goaltender. He gets in today and ends up coming away with a shutout in his second game. That's obviously something, if you're just trying to make sure that you're having some confidence. I think any goaltender loves to get 2 wins, but making one of them a shutout victory helps as well. So I think these are good building blocks for the Eagles. And obviously it's better than the alternative. You don't want to get they needed to get that stigma out of their heads that out of conference was a problem for them, and it was for more than 2 years, more than 2 seasons. But they got it out the end of last year, and I think it seems to be carrying into this season that they have all the confidence in the world to be a successful team.
Well, there was kind of a spoiler on Friday night. UMass Lowell heading up to Minnesota Duluth, banner hanging time for Duluth, but Lowell coming away with the victory.
Yeah, I was out there for that series, and I got to say that was a very good 2 nights of hockey. Lowell, a 3-2 winner on Friday, and then Minnesota Duluth rebounding with a 2-1 victory on Saturday. But that was heavy hockey. I'll tell you, you want to talk about teams that don't have any qualms about playing physical. They like to ride the man who has the puck, make it more difficult. A lot of just heavy pressure. It was great hockey to watch. A lot of ice bags needed at the end of that weekend. But for Lowell, they survived an early onslaught, and as you kind of expect after raising a national title banner, the Bulldogs had a lot of energy early, and Lowell had to survive that. Their goaltender Tyler Wall did a good job, and then they started to take advantage of mistakes, and Minnesota made them kind of in spades. Their defensive core in that second period, that long change, sometimes you get caught out in the ice, you get mentally fatigued, and it was some big turnovers that Lowell was able to take advantage of, and Hunter Shepard or net was still pretty solid for the Bulldogs, but he could only do so much. When you're stopping the first shot, the rebound's there, and Lowell was cleaning those up. That was actually the big difference on Saturday, where I thought that Shepard maybe left some rebounds out, but his defense were helping him get them out of harm's way, boxing out players. So Lowell was opportunistic. They jumped out to a 3-0 lead, Bulldogs did everything in the third period right, a 17-1 advantage in shots. But even that said, I thought that Lowell looked comfortable. They gave up 2 goals, an early one on the power play, and then an extra attacker goal late that gave at least a minute of pulled goaltender to try to tie the game for Minnesota Duluth. But the poise showed with Lowell, and that there's a lot of youth up front, but you have a senior goaltender in Tyler Wall, and he looked confident. So it was a good bounce back, I thought, for Minnesota Duluth on the second night. They were the better team. I thought Lowell probably had their chances. I think they were 0 for 7 on the power play, but I think that Duluth was the better team that night. These are two teams that I think toward the end of the year, we're going to learn how good they are. They're going to be there at the end of the season. Lowell is a very improved team. Minnesota Duluth still has a lot of talent. Particularly Scott Perunovitz, easily one of the better defensemen you'll see this year play college hockey.
The Icebreaker Tournament was in Toledo, Ohio this weekend, hosted by Bowling Green. They represented the WCHA, Ohio State from Big Ten, from the NCHC Western Michigan, and from Atlantic Hockey, RIT. The first round saw an upset in overtime, RIT over Bowling Green, a game where Bowling Green got the first 2 goals and RIT got the last 3, including the overtime winner. It was a crazy end to that game. RIT gave up a 1-on-4 rush into the zone in overtime, and there was a scramble after that, and somehow Bowling Green couldn't get it in. Caleb Moritz, a guy who went to Buffalo Sabres prospect camp, a Tiger freshman, gets his first goal in overtime. So pretty good story there. The early game saw Western Michigan and Ohio State play to a 2-2 tie through 5-on-5 overtime. So that's how it went in the books for NCAA purposes. No score during 3-on-3 overtime. And then after everybody had to sit around for several minutes for the Zamboni to do a dry scrape on the ice, Ohio State got the win to go on to the championship. Then on Saturday, the early game was the championship because Bowling Green as the host was in the later time of, they had that set up ahead of time to be the later game. RIT went out to a 1-0 lead. It was then 2-1 Ohio State, that 2-1 goal coming with 2 seconds left at the end of a 5-minute major that RIT gave up. And then a hop over the stick of a defenseman gave a breakaway to Ohio State to make it 3-1. So they went away with a championship. A big statement by Western Michigan over Bowling Green in the consolation. And I have to say, after seeing the 4 teams, that probably, while Ohio State is the champion, I've got to say Western Michigan was the best team in the tournament, especially the first period of that game against Ohio State, where they outshot them handily. I think it was 21-8 in the first period. So watch out for Western Michigan. They were a little bit of a disappointment last season, Jim. I think they're going to be much better this year.
Being out in NCHC country this weekend in Duluth, I heard a lot of people and talked to a lot of friends and people I know out there that follow that league very closely, and everybody is pretty high on Western. They think that they could be one of the better teams, pretty deep, and has some experience, and they want to right a wrong of last year because, as you said, they didn't have the performance that they hoped for, and I think that's gonna probably motivate. You've got a good coach in Andy Murray, and that they should be a dangerous team. And if you do have Western step up and maybe win the regular season, look at the development of how this league has gone. North Dakota with the national title, Denver, Duluth, a couple. You've had teams like St. Cloud up at the top of that league standings. Imagine the fact that you could have basically 5 of your 8 teams within the first 7 years have some sort of hardware to take home with them. That's a pretty impressive start for the NCHC. And I got a chance to talk to Josh Fenton, their commissioner, a couple of times over the weekend. They're happy. They're really happy with where things are in that league right now. And I think if you get somebody like a Western Michigan in there to I wouldn't even say pull an upset, but have some success, that's a nice statement for the development in that league.
Well, we've got a bunch of other games to cover. We're going to take a quick break and come back and do a lightning round through the rest of the games. This is the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast from US College Hockey Online.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast. I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly. Jim, North Dakota faced a blizzard in Grand Forks and still put 7,500 people in the seats. And those folks got to see a real statement as the Fighting Hawks sought some revenge on a team that kept them out of the NCAA tournament last year.
Yeah, nobody up in Grand Forks will forget about Canisius and last season, the 2 wins out in Buffalo that basically were, mathematically kept the Fighting Hawks from the tournament. And their coach, Brad Berry, surprised the team a little on Friday night. He put their black jerseys in their lockers to wear for the game. And it's not something that they typically ever do at home. It's a third jersey. He calls them their business suits, and they only pull them out in these big games that they feel the need that they have to win. So interestingly, he yanks them out, and they end up wearing these jerseys. And they both nights very handily defeated Canisius. The games were close at times, but both nights, Canisius, North Dakota, were able to really take control. And I believe it was the second night. If I read Brad Schlossman, he was the one who actually gave me that 7,500 estimate on people, because Canisius announced North Dakota announced 11,000 fans plus in the stands, which that's probably sold tickets. Anyways, if I read his tweet right, they only allowed 12 shot attempts last night from Canisius, which is that's pretty impressive when you're playing that well defensively. That these are not shots on goal; these are even attempted shots. You're talking about they're not even getting a chance to have a shot blocked or miss the net by 5 feet. They're not even getting the attempts. That's a pretty remarkable stat. So I think that's another team that not a lot of people are talking about here early. That they're going to be they have a chance to be a deadly team here. If they get things together, they've got a lot of the pieces to the puzzle to be a successful team this year.
With UMass Lowell getting the split with Minnesota Duluth over the weekend, the Bulldogs probably will not be the number 1 team, although they may still get first place votes in Monday's USCHO.com poll. 2 teams that will probably vie for number 1 are Denver and Minnesota State. Denver back home after a road trip that included 2 games at Alaska and 2 games at Lake Superior State with a stop in Detroit in between. Dave Carl tweeted on Sunday afternoon that they were back home and happy to be there. Meanwhile, Minnesota State swept Arizona State. So not the top competition in Division I hockey, not to disparage the opponents, but Denver starting out 4-0. Minnesota State sweeping Arizona State. Arizona State 1-3 after splitting with Mercyhurst. Is, I guess, a 2-part question. Are Denver and Minnesota State as good as we think they are? I think they are. And is Arizona State maybe not as good as we expected?
I mean, for me, jury's out on both of those. I do believe that, Denver and Minnesota State are very good teams. And I guess we'll see as the season goes on. But, don't forget that Denver, playing in the NCHC, that's kind of a war of attrition. They're going to have their losses, their share of losses, because they're just playing such a high level of competition. Minnesota State, I think that we know that they're a very good team. Their whole challenge has really been showing it in the postseason. But they're a very well coached team. They always have been. And I do believe that, Arizona State that they swept this weekend, I think that's a pretty good team. They didn't lose too much from last year's NCAA tournament team. So I would say that I wouldn't sleep on Arizona State. I think that they're a team that's going to be fine. They had to get some first weekend jitters out, and really should have been 2-0 when you think about the way that series went, and losing a game late in regulation. It got tied and then won in overtime. So part of me has some concern. But at the same time, I think Arizona State has a good coach, and they have some good enough players that should be a pretty good team as this year presses on.
One of the upsets over the weekend, number 7 Providence going down. Holy Cross, led by Providence alum and former assistant coach there, David Berard. A late goal to tie it and an overtime goal to win 3-2.
And hey, that's a great win for Dave Berard and his team to go back to his alma mater, a school he coached at for a long time, as well as as an assistant coach. He was there more than a decade. Take his Holy Cross team in there, hang in there all game, find a way to tie the game on an extra attacker goal. The goal he pulled, and then a beautiful stretch pass in overtime. Dara was, I believe, the player's name who scored the goal. Makes a gorgeous move. When I'll tip my hat a little bit here and tell you that when you see plays of the week tomorrow, I'm pretty sure, unless I get other submissions, that will probably be the number one play of the week, because it was a great pass and an even better move. So I think it's fantastic, for a team like Holy Cross to be able to go into a very good Providence team. That's a team that blanked Maine 7-0 a week ago. So I'm interested to kind of see where things will go from here for Providence. I think they're a darn good team. Maybe they didn't give Holy Cross all the respect they needed, but for Holy Cross, that's a good win. That's a very good road win to start this year.
A series I thought would probably end up in a split more likely than not was Quinnipiac and AIC. Quinnipiac 3-2 winners at home on Friday and also on Saturday in the return trip to Springfield. AIC, though, going out to a 2-0 lead on that. We can expect AIC to be back in the mix at the top of Atlantic hockey, and Quinnipiac picking up where they left off last year, coming back last season after 2 seasons ago having a really down year.
Yeah, I think that we have a very good Quinnipiac team here, and they knew their opponent in AIC. This is a team that most people believe will dominate in Atlantic hockey again. To have that home and home, they found ways to win. The Bobcats did. They're going to be a very good team. I don't know where I've had them on my ballot over the last couple of polls, but they're a top 10 team in my mind right now, and being able to earn those wins. And people are probably sitting out there saying, "Oh, come on, they're AIC. It's AIC." AIC is in Atlantic hockey, for that matter. We cannot look back at even 3 or 5 years ago and try to compare them. This team has improved. It is one of the better, harder working teams in the country. They gave Quinnipiac everything they could handle this weekend. That was a good opponent that Ram Pecknell and this team had to sweep.
Lastly, we want to mention Clarkson at Michigan, the number 11 Knights going in. A 1-1 tie on Friday, 3-1 win at Yost on Saturday. Transfer Frank Marat, graduate transfer goalie for Clarkson, gave up just 2 goals on 72 shots he faced.
Yeah, and I think that I'm not sure where Michigan is going to end up this year. I still feel like they're a good team. I feel like any team that Mel Pearson coaches is a good team. And I think you can say the same for Clarkson. I'm high on Clarkson. I think they have a lot of the pieces there to be a good team. And when you coach by Casey Jones, things go your way. That he gets a lot out of his players. I expect a good season. So to go into Yost, get 3 out of 4 points this weekend, Casey and his team have to really be feeling up after that. That's going to be a great way to come back. And to do it, allowing only 2 goals on the weekend, that's another big part of it. I mean, you're talking about a defense that can shut things down. And if this goaltender, this grad transfer can do some of these things that, every coach hopes when they bring in an experienced goaltender, that they can step in and play like that. It'll be interesting to watch. That's a team to keep your eye on. They're feeling like a top 20 team to me, maybe a top 15 team. A couple more wins, you could easily see them move right up the pole.
Frank Marat had a great career in 3 seasons at Robert Morris, so his success at Clarkson really shouldn't be a surprise.
No, I think that's a big part of it, and obviously nowadays, especially we've seen goaltenders are kind of in spades this year, transferring as graduate students and getting that one last year in with a different program. And it's usually some of the better goaltenders that are doing it. You look at Lackey from Harvard, went down to Providence. He's going to try to, at least kind of buffer between us, a good goaltender, and what is in the recruiting pipeline for Providence. And then Northeastern did the same thing. They grabbed a goaltender from Merrimack. Some of these better goaltenders out there that, maybe weren't, winning per se. I don't know what it usually is what you believe when you leave a program, especially if you're a goaltender, what you're looking for. You leave a program because you're either not happy with the program or you're not happy with the coach. And whatever the reason is for these players to leave, they're going in, and every one of them usually trying to pick programs that they're identifying that maybe I can be the difference maker and bring this team to a championship. So I think in all these cases, that's kind of what these goaltenders are trying to do.
Transfers is an issue that we may want to take a look at in another episode of a podcast down the road. The number is increasing by quite a bit, not just players that are dissatisfied go somewhere else and sit out a year, but a lot of graduate transferring and making a difference. And that number is going up, and it's kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, I talked to, I believe it was Scott Sandelin I was talking with over the weekend about this, and it's different. Coaches really, all you have to do is go back 10 years. This didn't happen. The reason was, the rules, the loophole kind of to have that grad transfer has always been there as far as I know, but kids weren't able to graduate in 3 years. And now a lot of coaches have players there basically 12 months a year taking classes, working out, practicing. And because of that, you're able to, earn extra credits in the summertime, earn extra credits in the winter session. And next thing you know, you've got enough credits to graduate in 3 years. And that gives you the option. You don't have to sit out a year as a grad transfer student. And more and more players are starting to take advantage of that loophole. And it's I don't love it because it kind of does make me feel like there's some free agency now in college hockey. It's not exactly that, but it has that kind of professional free agency feeling. It's strange. It's different. You and I have been around this game long enough that, major change like this isn't something you expect. And, now more than ever, it's not even that it's just you're transferring. Now you're seeing players transfer within their own conference and, going to face their teammates, a year later. So we've always had transfers, but there was always the penalty to sit out and all that sort of stuff. So it's different. And I don't have a better way to really sum it up. But it's not going away. I don't think it's anything that's going to go away anytime soon.
Well, this is the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast. We do it at the end of the weekend every week. 2 other podcasts from USCHO.com include USCHO Spotlight Midweek, and towards the end of the week, the USCHO Game of the Week, previewing the big game of the weekend that we've picked, plus some of the other highlight games that'll be going on. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger. Make sure you go to USCHO.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe. We'll see you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of US College Hockey Online. Visit USCHO.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.